Hi there, John Siddique here. Welcome to my blog and YouTube channel. And today I wanted to make a video about journaling. Journaling is something that I've done a great deal of my life. I think I've probably kept a journal for about 25 years now, and very often people ask me about journaling, and I sometimes teach journal writing sessions and so on, and so this video is especially for my friend Patrick, who wanted me to kind of have a little think about journaling. So I've got no plan about what I'm going to speak about. I just thought I've got half an hour free. One of my students at York has cancelled, so I've got a little bit of space. I'm in my Royal Literary Fellows office. It's a very bare environment because it's used by other people too, so it's kind of a bit of like a timeshare office. Anyway, this is my journal. This is the kind that I use. I've got this shelf of black journals in my office, kind of going back 25 years, and I go through quite a number of these things each year. So I sometimes think that my real job is to keep this, and then out of this kind of ideas come for poems and books and stories and whatever. So yeah, so what can I tell you about journaling? I think there are just so many approaches to it. Something I'd be interested in hearing from you is, because the way I use a journal kind of splits into two in some ways. On the one hand, I use it as a writer, and on the other hand, I use it for my kind of conscious development. You know, I'm very interested in kind of the conscious evolution of the human being, and of connecting to my soul, my source, and living outwards from there. And so I use my journal in both ways. But just to be less esoteric about it, I'll just give you a quick guided tour of my journal. And here it is, and it sounds very obvious, but a journal has a front and a back. And what I tend to do is I write my actual entries in the front of the journal, a poem or a diary entry, or what I've been dreaming, or something I've overheard that's interesting, observation that I've made, a sketch of things, outline of an idea, etc, etc. I've just had a new book idea actually, so I've just been kind of mapping, that's not even what I've been doing really, no, not mapping, just kind of listing an approach really, or several approaches to kind of take to doing this thing, and it's something I'm going to try and do very quickly over the next few months. So the front of the book tends to have like the writing itself. At the back of the book I make lists of things. So here we have a list of kind of ideas of things to write about. I'll just take this piece of paper out because it keeps falling. That's from my first story workshops the other day. That's what we were doing last week. And the reason that I do this, I keep a list of kind of writing topics, is to stop blank page syndrome. You know, when we sit down to write, very often we just don't know what to write, and there's a very mistaken idea that for writers, that we just kind of sit down and bleed and kind of puke all over the page and talk about kind of like the dark parts, oh me, oh poor me. And of course the journal is a valid place for that. There's a time early in my writing where I just literally, my journal was almost like a vomitorium, excuse my language, for just trying to kind of clear stuff out. You know, I grew up in a kind of highly sort of volatile environment and a very sort of racist town, sort of National Front skinheads and absolute craziness going on, literally being hunted, you know, at times. And so all that stuff kind of embodies, it kind of gets down into the body. And so we try to tell people about it, but they can't hear what we're saying, you know, or they don't really want to hear what they're saying, or they hear us, and but it doesn't sort of solve anything inside, you know, we don't process it through the heart and move on. But I found by kind of journaling in difficult times like that, then you can close the book and it's done. You know, I have a saying, the paper can take it. I have it written up on the wall at home. The paper can take it, and it can much better than other people can. So you know, if you do need to kind of just get stuff out and get it down, then it's a kind of good place for that. The one drawback with working in that way, however, is that if we become a victim to it, you know, if we're writing it down and we're seeing ourselves from a kind of victim point of view, if you keep repeating that thing over and over, it will actually change the neural pathways in our heads and will actually hardwire ourselves into victimhood. Maybe if we could kind of get stuff down and then look about how best to respond to things, then that might kind of lead in a different way. But that's, like I say, more therapeutic, more kind of personal development sort of way of working. For this video, I just wanted to talk to you about sort of being a writer. And I just haven't quite finished my tour of the notebook. I've kind of gone off on one. The other thing, of course, my notebook has is pocket at the back. And I keep sort of treasure in here, so things that I find that are treasure. Postcards and photos. I keep my manifesto in here. If you want to look at my on my blog or on my website, you'll see a thing that says statement. That's my manifesto, and that gets upgraded. And I'll talk about that more in a kind of journaling for spiritual or personal development video, I think, as a separate thing. And I'll try to make a series of these videos. But just going back to being a writer, so what I will tend to do is I do writing practice a couple of times a week, like Natalie Goldberg talks about in Writing Down the Bones, which just keeps my hand in when I'm not actually working on a book or something. When I have an actual project going, then I tend to write stuff longhand in the notebook, and I write on a daily basis. Not worrying about whether it's any good or not, but just trying to get stuff down, and out of that I find out that I've written what I don't want to write about, which then leaves me space to write what I want to write about, or I find out what it is that I actually want to say. So as a writer, I find that the journal becomes a kind of treasure house, and a place to kind of, you know, that sort of first little line comes into your head of a poem, or you get a little snippet of kind of almost like musical language or something, and we get that down, and then from there, just by kind of attending to it, it will grow. Like I say, I maybe do writing practice a couple of times a week. It's what you might call free writing, or automatic writing and stuff like that. You'll hear it sort of called by different names, but I just call it writing practice, and because writing is a muscle thing. People often make the mistake that you have to think of everything first, and then sit down and try and write, and then obviously nothing matches up with what you're trying to say. Whereas I find that if I begin writing, and it doesn't really matter what, then I kind of gravitate towards my ideas and what it is that I'm thinking about, and where things are trying to go, and I will let a piece develop over time, over multiple drafts, and often in the notebook, the multiple drafts in the notebook, because there's something about the sort of the physicality of kind of, you know, you write with a pen, but your arm connects to your heart and then kind of comes up to your communication center here, which of course is then kind of connected to your brain, and your brain this way, this way, this way. So there's a kind of like a sort of physical biofeedback loop going on. And if we start moving one part of it, then we get the whole thing moving. So if you just were wanting to get going in the first place, you know, you don't need to buy an expensive journal or anything. Just go and buy a notebook, sit down and write. But then the question comes, well, what do I write? So I've come up with, at the back of my notebook, a little list for you. There's 7 little writing topics here. And maybe I'll just kind of pop up in a week's time or so on here again and just give you a few more writing topics. Writing tends to kind of fall into 2 areas, I find. It either tends to be observational or reflective, and I'll kind of look at that sort of maybe later on. But here is 7 writing topics for you, so if you wanted to kind of sort of grab a pen and note these down, feel free to do them, feel free not to do them, of course. It's your writing, you know, this is private. That's the big thing about notebooks, you know. that they're absolutely private. Every one of my friends and every member of my family knows that even if this is sitting on the table and I'm not around, that it doesn't get looked at. You know, we need a private space. Young people especially have very little private space, and we give it away, you know, without holding our phone in our hands, being on the internet, being on the phone itself, Facebooking, Twittering, Instagramming, and so on. We use up our free space. We don't allow for the wonderful things that boredom brings. When we sit bored, there's a chance for ideas to kind of spring out, you know, and then if your notebook is there with you, then there's a chance to kind of get things down. So allow yourself, if you can, just to sit, and if you feel yourself not going anywhere, don't reach for your phone. Put your phone off and put it in another room. Be nowhere near a screen. You know, if you're one of these people who look at their phone, and I do this myself sometimes, look at your phone while you're in bed just before you go to sleep, and then find that you can't sleep, maybe just try writing a bit in your journal instead. Leave your phone downstairs. If somebody's going to call, they will call back or they will leave a message. You know, nothing is that important anymore. You know, we're not in a state of emergency all the time. It's just that powers that be, that, you know, or we kind of want to believe that that's the way things are, and we put ourselves into a driven fear state all the time. Anyway, so here's a list of writing topics for the week. So number one, just wherever you are, or if you're in a cafe or something like that, just 10 minutes or 20 minutes, a straight observation of what you see. Don't write what you feel, just write what you see, and in specific detail, okay? So no judgment in there, no commenting on the people, but actually just trying to, it's like being a sketch artist with a notebook. You're actually trying to just draw the people, draw the scene, what's going on. And your character and your emotionality will come through in the sketch, you know, because that's how it will be. We don't actually need to put our feelings and thoughts into it in that way, of trying to kind of force our thing upon it. By recording the scene as beautifully and specifically as possible, then we will be there too, you see. So a straight observation. Another really lovely thing to do is the room that you're in, just write about the quality of the light. The quality of the light coming into that room. And if it's a dark room, then of course, then you write about that. Third one, a story of somebody that you notice in a restaurant or a cafe, and just write it down for real. So you kind of, you will spot a character, and then you just let yourself develop a story from that. But you write it as real to the truth as you're presenting itself as possible. So for example, I was in a restaurant last week while I was here in York, last Tuesday night in fact, and I decided to kind of treat myself and kind of go out. I normally bring some food into my hotel and stay raw, but I really needed a warm meal, and I'd been very poorly with this virus that's been going around, so I just wanted a kind of a very grounding meal. So I went to a restaurant, and there was a chap who was obviously with his girlfriend, and he was with his future kind of, well, I think it was like we were going to get a little kind of announcement of we were going to get married, and they were talking to the girlfriend's mum and her sister, and he just did not look like he belonged there at all. So I just thought he would, you know, I was thinking kind of like Raymond Carver. What an interesting story that would be. I would like to write him from a kind of Raymond Carver-esque sort of point of view. Number 4, you could write about an ending, whatever that means, whatever the first thing that comes into your head or heart is about that. You could write about a beginning. You could write about the stars last night, or you could write a piece about what your idea is of love, and kind of get that down. So there's plenty there to go on with. So if you need a writing topic, just sort of take one of those and run with it. If you want to write for 7 days straight, you could take each of those and kind of go with it. And like I say, I'll pop up every now and then and try to give some more writing topics. I think that's a good place to kind of end for now, because otherwise I'll just try to load too much information in. And if you would be kind enough to kind of give us a thumbs up if you've liked this video, or to follow the blog, or leave a comment below. Shall I separate sort of personal development and spiritual development out from writing and just do writing on its own, and then have a kind of personal development strand, or shall I put both together? For me, both run side by side. My entire sort of movement through life since I started writing in journals, it's the writing in the journals that turned me into a poet and a writer, and then it was the being a poet and the writer that has led me to my connection to my conscious evolution. So one thing doesn't operate without the other, you see. So that's what it is. So in my head they're the same thing, but you might want to kind of think about things in different ways. So do let me know, or if you've got any questions, or anything you want to ask me about journals, then ask me, and then I can answer them in future videos. It'd be really nice to kind of give you the content that you would like. So thank you very much, and bless you, whatever you're doing today. I hope you're having an abundant and wonderful day of your life, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.